So the last time I did a list pertaining to my favorite monsters of all time was about, I would say, 3 years ago. Now with a fresh new perspective and a brand new amazing Monster Hunter game, well, I think it's about time we still revisit this subject for the third time on this channel, because yes, I've done it twice before. Now, I was gonna do a top 10, because that's what everyone does, but I really could not settle on just 10. I had to do 20. I've always loved Monster Hunter ever since I was a young kid, and now at nearly 25 years old, I'm still playing these games. As a matter of fact, I'm currently playing through 3 Ultimate again, and who knows, I might do a full in-depth breakdown of the game later this year. If I'm being honest, it's one of my favorite games of all time. But before we begin, my only rule here is no subspecies, rare species, or variants on this list. I'm only going to talk about the original design monsters, and we can leave the subspecies and the other variants for like a later top 10 if you guys want to see that. As always, I encourage you all to post your favorite monsters down below because I want to see that. And without further ado, my name is Josh, also known as Gorguini Magala, and I hope you enjoy my top 20 favorite monsters in Monster Hunter. One of the new wyvern classes we got in Monster Hunter Wilds were cephalopods. There are only 2 at the moment, which means you have a 50% chance of guessing the number 20 spot, and if you said New Udra, you were correct. While this game does have very poor optimization, I can't not talk about that. There is a great game underneath all the performance issues. I think the monster designs we got are some of the most creative creatures yet, including New Udra, a giant, oiled up octopus that sets itself on fire when enraged. You might be thinking, Josh, what could be better than that? According to my personal opinion, the next 19. But seriously, New Udra is a very fun fight that sticks out like an oily thumb. His weird, unique movements were such a blast to watch and counter. The sound design is pretty great too, but most new monsters in Wilds have incredible audio to enhance the hunting experience. I love New Udra's Fire Blast because it kinda sounds like a whoopee cushion at the start. Unlike most monsters, he has 8 distinct individual appendages that move independently to cover more weak spots. It's pretty cool, but what I really love is when a game developer takes a creature out of its natural habitat and puts it somewhere else to have it make sense. New Udra, is an octopus, and he live in water, and so they put it in the literal complete opposite environment and had it make sense. And much like a real-life octopus, New Udra can squeeze into tight spaces and use them to his advantage mid-fight. New Udra is a classic example of Monster Hunter's creative creature designs, and why I still think to this day that this series has some of the best creature designs in all of gaming. For those of you who haven't seen my Frontier video, yes, I played Monster Hunter Frontier Z a few months ago for the first time, and I recorded every single monster I fought. Which means, since my last list, I have another 100 plus monsters to choose from for my top 20. Thankfully, only 2 made it onto the list. Out of all the 152 monsters in that game, yes, there are that many, Kyo-Aruboru is one of my favorites. He is a giant elder dragon with heavy forelimbs covered in dense charcoal-like scales, reindeer antlers, and the ability to nuke the arena with his intense body heat as he so pleases. It's actually an easier fight than you think it is, because Frontier has many mobility options, so the monsters can, and will, have ridiculous attacks that normally would be unfair in the main franchise. Beyond that, and I hate to admit it, but sometimes I like how a monster looks so much it makes it onto my list. There's no other reason besides that, and I think Kyo has one of the best designs in Frontier. I mean, toppling over a gargantuan dragon will never not be satisfying, but he's really only here because of the design, hence why he's only number 19. Like I mentioned before, currently playing through 3 Ultimate, and there are some older monsters that have never made it into the newer games that I have missed dearly. Now, some crossed into Generations Ultimate, hopefully you get that pun there, but even then, that was 8 years ago. I did not expect the Ignactor to be a hidden favorite of mine until I fought him again. Back then, you didn't have many monsters with ridiculous mechanics or hidden abilities that grew stronger as the fight continued. Which, by the way, I'm glad that we have those type of monsters now, but in 3 Ultimate, it was a very rare occurrence. The Ignactor was one such wyvern because of the magma on his body. If he was out fighting the player for a long time, the magma would harden, creating a thick layer of igneous rock that you could not penetrate, even with purple sharpness. Ignactor's main fighting style is burrowing through the magma and surprising the player with quick strikes or fire beams. You know, the classic. As soon as he reemerges, the magma would soften and instead of armor became a weakness. You know, it's such a clever mechanic that dictates how the fight goes for this monster. Your goal is to essentially knock off as much magma as possible before it hardens. If it's soft, aim for the legs to knock him over and go for the spine or tail or whatever, really. I just missed this monster, man, and I'm hoping they bring him back because as it is, he is a gem of a fight that has been lost to time. Now, this monster was in my top 10 before, but has moved way down the line for seemingly no reason, but I still think is an amazing monster. Namiel is a new Elder Dragon introduced in Iceborne that has two elements at its disposal, water and thunder. He's inspired by deep-sea creatures, and their characteristics are beautifully baked into this fight. He stings like a jellyfish, shoots water like a fish, I think, and creates puddles of water for your toddler to jump in before getting electrocuted. Especially the arc-tempered version, he was insane back in the day. Namiel is a very unique fight. He's far from your traditional Elder Dragon, so he stands out from the rest in Iceborne specifically. The way he stings with his wingtips is such a genius idea that I still very much admire. If he overexerts himself, however, he can be, quite literally, drained of his water and color. To me, I like it more when a monster has an ability that needs to be maintained rather than just being overpowered all the time. You also don't appreciate the color scheme of Namiel until he regains it when slurping up that good Aquafina into his normal state again. He has an elegant design, cool attack patterns, and a solid foundation of inspiration. So that begs the question, why is he so low? The reason why he's gone so far down my list since my last one is because he just did. It's not like he murdered my family or anything, but I think the newer monsters are cooler, and I had regained some lost admiration for older monsters, leaving Namiel here at the number 17 spot. I mentioned there are only 2 monsters from Frontier on this list, but technically there are 3, because Espinos originated in Frontier but was miraculously brought into Sunbreak. It was an important moment to us hunters because this paved the way for potentially other Frontier monsters to migrate into the mainline games. Regardless, Espinos was an excellent start. After fighting him in Frontier as well, I'd say the Sunbreak version far surpasses its Japanese exclusive counterpart. Espinos is a thorned flying wyvern that gradually gets angrier the more you fight it, just like your ex-girlfriend. As it gets more enraged, its hide begins to soften, leaving him exposed to way more damage. Think of him as a glass cannon because he's not a long fight from my perspective, but he will tear through you like paper if you're not careful. The main way he does this is with the giant horn on his face, because it also inflicts poison. I have died multiple times to this exact combo. A rush attack that leaves me with a sliver of health, and then the poison finishes me off right after. He was definitely hard back in the day, like especially when you first fought him, but not impossible in Sunbreak, especially with the wirebugs. Espinos also has a unique trait of firing toxic fireballs. This leaves you both poison and burn, which I'm sure you can understand, not a great spot to be in. I know we're only talking about the main species here, but again, I really need to mention this cool thing about the subspecies, Orange Espinos. His weapons deal both fire and poison damage in both games. Super cool, and I just wanted to mention it for that reason. It's freaking awesome. In reality, Espinos is not the most unique monster, but he's the heart of Frontier, and still an incredible monster to challenge. And since I played Frontier, you're probably wondering what he was like in that game. Honestly, he was alright. It was the rare species and the hardcore variants you had to watch out for, which I don't really want to talk about. You know, it's weird. Volcana was a slow burn for me. I thought it was a great flagship, nothing crazy, but it was a monster I didn't really give a second look at. I was more distracted by the fact that Giganox hasn't returned since 3 Ultimate. But up until recently, I've started to really appreciate Volcana's sleek design and rather graceful fighting style. He uses ice breath attacks that accumulate crystals in the air over time, and a sharpened tail of ice to stab players with its wonky hitboxes. I gotta admit, he has a pretty basic skeleton for an Elder Dragon, but you know what? They managed to utilize it in a way that's very clever. He certainly can be annoying to fight at times. I think out of all the monsters on this list, he's one of the most annoying for me, but really it's nothing major. I mean, theoretically, all monsters can give you a hard time with the right circumstances. However, Volcana can also unintentionally help the hunter. If you break the giant ice walls, you create platforms to jump off of, and get a potential mount on the Elder Dragon. And you know, it's ideas like these that I love in boss design. Their main strength can also be a tool to your advantage. Like, I love that type of stuff. His ice armor can also be broken with enough damage, which is such a satisfying thing to do. It's weird because, to me at least, there aren't that many cool ice-type monsters in the series. I mean, don't get me wrong, there aren't any bad monsters by any means, but I think my bias towards dragons and other elements is going to be very obvious the later we go down this list. Volcana, though, is an amazing monster and a great flagship. Not my favorite, though, as you'll see soon enough. This one's a classic to me. I have fought this monster since 3 Ultimate, and it's appeared in most other games since then. Nargacuga. You know, it's hard not to talk about the giant Black Panther dragon with blade-like wings and a spiky tail. He's just so freaking cool. This is where simple design works for the better. Like, I do like some of the overcomplicated designs in Frontier, but Nargacuga is so simple, and it doesn't need all the spikes or appendages to get across what they bring to the table. Just by looking at him, you understand what he's about. He's been on my list before, but has moved down since then. Still, I love this guy. Nargacuga is a stealthy hunter, one that pounces on hunters using the bad camera angles to its advantage. He doesn't wildly attack, he's calculated but fierce, and that's why I love this guy. He's not as challenging now, but back in the older games for sure, he gave me some trouble, in a good way. Monster Hunter by no means is supposed to be Dark Souls level of difficulty, but with how many unique monsters there are, there will be some that to you, or to me, based on your fighting style, you will struggle against. Nargacuga was one of my biggest roadblocks back in the day. He's been ingrained into my mind since then, and one that I can't help but appreciate his design and tenacity. I've learned now to let him miss his attacks and jab him when I get the chance, and also, the theme song never fails to be a bop. It has been good across all the games. Fire and Ice, 2 complete opposites that combine into one Elder Dragon. It's unfortunate that many people have not experienced the difficulty and spectacle of Iruzerion from Monster Hunter Frontier Z. I mentioned this before in my Frontier top 10, but seeing an Elder Dragon with the body of a Fanged Wyvern is weird, but surprisingly, it works. Iruzerion is a fast monster with the ability to wield fire and ice at the same time. If you couldn't tell already, the red side is fire, the blue side is ice. He easily combines them together into stringed combos that can easily feint any player who is not prepared. Which was me, many times. Frontier is a very difficult game, but Iruzerion was one of my biggest walls in G rank. He can freeze the player in a block of ice and follow up with a giant fire AoE. He can combine the 2 elements into a spirit bomb that nukes half the entire arena because why not? And of course, he has a second phase where just everything increases by tenfold, like Kaioken. He's not for the faint of heart. You will rage against this guy if you're fighting him for the first time. Honestly, that's kind of most of Frontier if I'm being honest. This game is brutal at certain points. Still, Iruzerion is an incredible monster, and one that stuck out on my journey as one of the best. Our second monster from Monster Hunter Wilds, one who might be considered the second flagship of the game, is none other than Ray Dow. I'm sure many of you watching have Ray Dow in your top 10 list somewhere, and you're probably frothing at the mouth wondering why he's not in my top 10. Relax, let me explain. One of Monster Hunter Wilds' greatest features was the environmental changes, and in the case of Windward Plains, there comes a time when thunder roams across the lands, and this is where Ray Dow prospers. Listen, you know you're screwed when a monster gets struck by lightning and doesn't react at all. He's become one with the thunderstorms and uses the lightning to his advantage by folding his horns and shooting bolts of said lightning like a biological railgun. I think my nipples got hard from excitement. I've seen a lot of ways monsters use their abilities, but this is definitely one of the best. Ray Dow just oozes creativity. And his theme song too, oh my goodness, it's simply masterful. Easily one of my favorite themes in the game. I can't really say there's anything wrong about Ray Dow, which begs the question, why is he not higher on my list? The truth is, I don't really know exactly. He just isn't. In reality, I think it's because he's new, and I don't have any ties to this monster. You're gonna see very quickly that many of the older monsters are in my top 10, and it's because I kinda grew up with them. Memories are attached to them, but I barely have any for Ray Dow. And honestly, and it sucks that this is the case, but the performance issues for Monster Hunter Wilds does dramatically affect how I feel about the monsters. If I can't fully immerse myself in the game without worrying about the CPU overheating, because yes, it gets very hot, at least from my circumstances, then you're not going to see me view all the new monsters in a totally positive light. Regardless, there are good monsters, great even in Monster Hunter Wilds, but they're attached to a game that has too many issues for me to ignore. It puts a blemish on a lot of things. Even then, I still love Ray Dow, so it's impressive that he's made it this far down the list with these issues. Ray Dow is pretty cool, but he's actually not my favorite Apex. That belongs to Jin Dahad. Jin Dahad is different from all the other Apex monsters because his fight is structured more akin to a raid fight. Think of Safi Jiva or Kulv Taroth. You have to break the different metallic ridges on his body to reduce the power of his ice attacks. Which, let's pause here for a moment, because a giant leviathan with metallic plates across his entire body that acts as an entire cooling system is just plain awesome. He looks semi-artificial, like a giant ancient weapon that became sentient. I adore his design. Breaking those metal plates and slowly stripping the power away from this Leviathan is nothing short of satisfying. And much like other raid monsters, he has a nuke attack. Although it's not as powerful, thankfully, and he provides cover for you to hide behind. And you know what? I'm not usually a fan of bosses that have structure to it. I'd rather just go in and let the fight play out organically. But Jin Dahad is a rare case of me being fine with it. So much so that he's this close to my top 10. He even has his own area, and the transitions in between phases do give Jin Dahad a more natural appeal. The way he claws up the cliffside, seeing his giant body move effortlessly across the ice is also really cool. With the new gameplay mechanics in Wilds, it truly is a blast to fight this giant monster. With number 10, yet another flagship makes it onto my list, Gore Magala, and by extension, Shigaru Magala. And you know what, I don't like having two monsters in the same entry, so if I had to choose one, I'm gonna go with Shigaru. And for Ultimate, we had an actually good plotline between the player and Gore Magala. You encountered it multiple times and even witnessed a cutscene of it molting into Shigaru Magala before the final showdown. It's one of the rare instances where Monster Hunter does a pretty good job of building up the final fight in the village part of the game. When it comes to the fight itself, I mean, come on, it's pretty cool, both in the older games and in Sunbreak. In 4 Ultimate and Generations, he's a class act Elder Dragon with the ability to wield the Frenzy status to a masterful degree. As a matter of fact, this monster is the cause of basically the endgame grind in 4 Ultimate, and I really like that. I love it when a monster is responsible for a certain mechanic in the game. He'll infuse it into his attacks or spawn explosions underneath the player so that nowhere is safe, except for the giant rock inside the arena. Now, the soundtrack in Monster Hunter is always incredible. I have had zero complaints when it comes to that category, except for Kezu. In Shigaru Magala's case, the music truly enhances the fight in my experience. It's this climactic bravado of your final battle against the main antagonist of the game. It's cinematic, as if this is the final chapter of your adventure, which it kinda is. Shigaru's theme is one of my favorites, and it's been a slow burn over the years where I started to appreciate it more. Now in Sunbreak, they reworked his fight to be even more cinematic, but still combat appropriate. Especially the Risen version, that is crazy. He has brand new attacks that show off new abilities with the Frenzy status, and it's nothing short of amazing. He even has a powered up phase near death that makes his attacks even more lethal, because, you know, why not? And his design, man, it is so freaking cool. I love the contrast between Gore Magala's black color scheme and then Shigaru's pure white. It makes him look angelic in a sense, and he has a reputation to back it up. Also, his quest is called Heaven's Wheel, so it kind of fits the theme here. I will say, it's a bit weird seeing an arena-specific Elder Dragon now here in a random map in Rise, but you know what, whatever, it's not the end of the world. With Gore Magala and Monster Hunter Wilds, they are for sure going to add Shigaru later down the line, and if they don't, that's stupid, but I think they will. Even then, Shigaru Magala is still freaking awesome, and now he's in my top 10. This next monster is an instant classic for me, one that crashes most high-rank quests, especially back in the 3rd generation where he was introduced. The original party crasher, Devil Joe. Devil Joe has such an influence during a hunt. You could be doing great against whatever monster you're fighting, only to hear the music change and find that dinosaurs do exist. In the older games, the way you would find out that this thing even existed was high-rank Kuropeko, another monster that I think should come back. The way Kuropeko works, basically, is it'll mimic the calls of other monsters and bring them into that specific area. When he first did Devil Joe's Roar, you have no idea what he's trying to summon. Doesn't sound like Raytheon or Great Jaggy. And then you see this giant dinosaur come into the room and instantly one-shot you. It's honestly amazing. When the time came to finally fight this monster, I honestly was a bit scared. I didn't feel like I was prepared, but I tried, and for once, it took me a couple of tries on my first time hunting him. Then again, I was like 11, 10, not exactly smart Alec over here, but regardless, I did beat him, and relief was an understatement. This monster would curb stomp you to death and dragon breath all over your corpse, and he can still do that today. Now, as an older, more experienced hunter, I can take advantage of his ravenous behavior by laying down drugged meat, but he's still a major threat. And then he was introduced in Monster Hunter World, and his rework did one of the best things I have ever seen. I've raved over this before, but seeing Deviljho use smaller monsters as a weapon is one of the coolest things I have seen in the series. Ironically, in the most recent update for Wilds, Seregios does the same thing with smaller monsters, but it's not on the same par as Deviljho. He has a whole new arsenal of deadly bites and jumps that put older Deviljho to shame. His fighting style is brute force, and I love it. And like Nargacuga, his design is kinda simple, but one that I've loved, and still love over the years. I mean, to be fair, I've always liked dinosaurs as a kid, and I still think they're pretty cool, so it feels like a no-brainer putting this monster on my list. Ever since its debut in Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, the Brachydios has never moved away from my top 10. He's definitely gone up on the list, but he's still here. I think the first list I ever made on this channel, which is private, you can't see it, but he was number 2 on that list. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm playing through 3 Ultimate again. He's still as much of a jerk as he was when I first fought him, and his slime weapons are still broken in that game. He's returned a few times since then, the most recent entry being Iceborne, and he's still an incredible fight. Again, I like dinosaurs, so it makes sense to put him on this list. My main argument before was how unique Brachydios was, and truthfully, it still holds up today. Every monster in the series has its own unique flair, but you don't find many dinos with the ability to punch explosive slime nowadays. Brachydios was the flagship of 3 Ultimate, and he carried such a presence in that game. He wasn't just the flagship, but the primary wheel that spun the meta in that game. Really, out of all the flagships, I feel like he was given the most love because he was just that important in that game. This was before Blast was even an ailment. It was just slime back then, and it was only him who could give weapons that ailment, and it was overpowered. In every installment, he was a powerhouse, and one that you couldn't just brute force your way through. It took a careful analysis to counteract the slime in his punches. Before long, the entire area became a minefield, forcing you to keep the environment in mind while fighting him. It adds a layer of difficulty that makes sense. It wasn't all too annoying. There were some cases on my playthrough now that he even gave me a hard time still. Regardless, he's an amazing monster, and one that sort of became an icon for me that represents Monster Hunter as a whole. We just talked about the flagship for 3 Ultimate, but what about the final boss? More specifically, the final boss in the online hub. Years ago, this used to be my #1 favorite monster for a long time, but has gradually gone down, not because I like him any less, but because better monsters have come out. Dire Morales is still one of my favorite monsters, and still an amazing fight to this day. That may ruffle some feathers because half of the fight does take place underwater, I get it. But you know what? I actually liked the underwater combat, so bite me. The fight is like any gargantuan dragon hunt. Stab at the limbs until it falls over so you can poke the chest or other appendages you normally can't reach. I'll admit, it's not the most enthralling fight I've seen, but I think it's still good. And what I like more is the lore implications and the design. Dire Morales is a walking piece of hell, a biological volcano that scorches entire landscapes with its mere presence. The reason it dips into the water throughout the fight is because it needs to constantly cool off its insanely high body temperature. Now, I understand that not many modern hunters have fought this black dragon or even know about him, and you know what, it's a darn shame. They really could do something incredible with this fight if he were to be brought back. He's on the same level as Fatalis. As a matter of fact, it's a relative of Fatalis. The lore states its heart ever so beats, even after death, and some say Dire Morales can regenerate from its heart alone. It's really cool lore that makes a monster stick out to me. I don't really know what else you want from me. I mean, Dire Morales can shoot giant meteors from its cannon-like wing appendages and drop nukes like it's throwing up a hairball. I guess I could explain why it's fallen back so much from my list before, and really it's because of time. After so many new games released, after the outdated mechanics, Dire Morales has been lost to time. And it's hard to bring him back because half of the fight does take place underwater, so I get it. But if he had modern mechanics, a modern fight similar to Elatrion or Fatalis in Iceborne, then he would for sure be way higher on this list. But for now, he still sits in the higher part of my top 10. The White Wraith was the main antagonist of Wilds, and the story revolved around some kid who was traumatized by this guy after it attacked his village. Blah blah blah, whatever, this story is not important. Many hunts later, we finally fight the freaking thing, and at that moment, I didn't care about the story at all. All I cared about was how amazing the chain whips were, and if we would ever get a similar weapon in the future. Anyways, Archveld snuck his way into the top 10 because, I mean, what's not to like about this monster? First of all, sick sound design. I already mentioned this in my top 10 Wilds monsters, but the detuned electric guitar roar is one of my favorite roars in the entire series. It doesn't even make sense. Like, what creature would make that noise? Archveld does, and it's great. As a flying wyvern, he's quite the acrobat and unleashes a plethora of combos and attacks that involve the amazing chain appendages on his wings that generate dragon energy when enraged. The way his chains change color as he uses the dragon energy is beautiful. I will say, Monster Hunter Wilds did a great job of visually bringing these monsters to life, and it shows well with Archveld. Much like most big new monsters, he has his own supernova, and Monster Hunter never disappoints with these attacks. With the new clash mechanic in Wilds, I found Archveld to be one of the best monsters to counter, and it became such a thrilling fight. I mean, Wilds in terms of difficulty kinda is booty cheeks, but Archveld was easily one of the most difficult monsters in the game. He's a great example of giving a monster a unique trait, the chain-like appendages, and creating a fight unlike any monster we've seen. Yes, he's considered a flying wyvern, but the structure of his skeleton, the way he fights, it does not relate to most wyverns in his class. He requires a whole new level of approach in order to counter his fierce tactics. Really, you can't go wrong with Archveld, if that makes sense. I wouldn't be surprised if most people had Archveld in their top 20 at least. He stands out to me as one of the best monsters in the series and deserves a spot on this list. The Eater of Elder Dragons, Nergigante. He needs no grand introduction, because I'm sure many of you know about him. You know, I'm surprised he hasn't been on my list before. The last time I did a list was when Monster Hunter Rise came out, and he just wasn't there. I realized suddenly over the past year that, well, wait a minute, I really like Nergigante. I don't know why I came to that realization out of nowhere, but it happened. And the main challenge here is to make an Elder Dragon intimidating enough, strong enough to hunt and eat other elders. And I think Monster Hunter World did a phenomenal job. Nergigante harbors 0 elements to its arsenal. It is pure brute force, with enough physical power to rival the likes of Deviljho and Rajang, even surpass them at times. However, one of my favorite qualities of Nergigante is his passive abilities. As the fight continues, Nergigante attacks with such power that he breaks his own spines all throughout his body. The spikes are soft and weak when they first start to grow, but if you don't break them in time, they become sharper, longer, and more akin to armor. A giant dragon-like hedgehog that can ram you with its entire body, pretty much insta-killing you when you first fight it. That's freaking awesome. I always enjoy a fight that gives you a goal to focus on. As Nergigante breaks his spines, your job is to keep them broken, so that he can't unleash his ultimate attack. At first, it is a gruesome fight, one that takes all of what you've learned up until this point. Now, after so much experience, he's actually kind of one of the easiest Elder Dragons in the game. To me, at least. He's an easy fight to master, but there's a beauty in that, I think. It's always satisfying to master a fight, but Nergigante feels better to overcome than most monsters. Nergigante's design is also, easily, one of my favorites in the entire series. The giant twisted horns, the spikes, the brute strength. He's built like a porcupine bodybuilder. It's so cool. You don't really come across a monster nowadays that have 0 gimmicks, really. Every single one has a status or ailment or element to take advantage of, or something, but Nergigante doesn't. And while it may become stale or easy to overcome compared to most other monsters, I don't think so. I think his lack of external statuses gives Nergigante more room for brute force play. I like to think of him as Rock Lee from Naruto. He sucks at Genjutsu and Ninjutsu, but excels in Taijutsu, which ironically is the hand-to-hand side of combat of being a ninja. Nergigante is the Taijutsu expert of Monster Hunter, and I also like Rock Lee, so it all works out in the end. So, I never had a chance to fight this monster up until Generations, and for context, I started with Monster Hunter 3 Tri. When I first laid eyes on this monster in-game, I immediately fell in love, and Amatsu definitely deserves a spot in my top 10. I cannot describe the amount of majesty this monster evokes. Amatsu truly is a spectacle to behold. His fight before was alright, and yet still made it onto my first list because he was that awesome to me. Now, in Sunbreak, with all the different game mechanics, he is an incredible fight. One that balances spectacle and combat so perfectly. Amatsu is a giant storm dragon that effortlessly floats in the sky like some sort of deity. He is known to create storms, and anywhere he goes, a storm follows. With his giant fins, he soars through the air, blasting hunters with high-pressurized water cannons. He can also create strong gusts of wind that literally sweep hunters into the air, and in Sunbreak, he uses these abilities in some of the most creative ways possible. Whether it be a storm barrier, giant tornadoes, or how about Beyblades of water and wind? It's insane! The creativity of Amatsu is not lost on me, and his majestic appearance only intensifies this encounter. His theme too fits so perfectly with the tone this fight has. It's not as chaotic as other monster themes, but calm and regal. Once he hits second phase, the theme picks up the pace, and Amatsu matches that energy with even more powerful attacks. The main reason I love Amatsu is because of his incredible design and how it's incorporated into the fight. See, having a giant dragon that floats all the time is already amazing, but you have to make it make sense gameplay-wise. It stands at such a unique perspective. This allows the developers to think, how can we make this dragon attack in a way that makes sense and still works for the gameplay? Amatsu answers that with graceful movements that match the water element it uses. Yet, it still floats close to the ground so that it's not annoying to fight, unlike other monsters that fly or float too much. And look, it's not lost on me that this list kinda boils down to, I think this monster's cool, but this one I think is better. But with Amatsu, there's a lot of reasoning behind it, and you know what, he is cooler. Except for the next three. I'm gonna make this entry easy for you to guess. Imagine a dragon mixed with the all-time classic horror icon, Dracula. There are a lot of modern Western dragon designs in Monster Hunter, but I don't care. I love every single one. And Malzeno, the flagship of Sunbreak, is a special case. There's a lot I could say about Malzeno that ties to its variant Primordial Malzeno, because technically, that's the original species of the Elder Dragon, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to talk about Malzeno, the first one we fight in Sunbreak. This guy not only has a Dracula theme to its design, but a heavy medieval appeal to its attack patterns. With a club-like tail, sword-like talons, and wing claws, Malzeno uses its entire body as an arsenal, which is interesting because the variant leans further into the medieval theme before it became symbiotic with the Quirio. Quiro? I don't know how to pronounce it, and I don't really care to look it up, but these little things are basically small lamprey-like leeches that attach to their prey, such as Malzeno. But he's so strong as an Elder Dragon that he's formed a bond with them, fusing his abilities with their abilities. Now he can enter an awakened state that increases his speed and power. So much so that it looks like Malzeno is straight up teleporting. A monster that can teleport is terrifying, but also insanely cool. One of the few monsters, after playing for so many years, that made me panic almost instantly. He creates explosions and shockwaves now that would be unfair in previous Monster Hunter games, but in Sunbreak, it's on par with the course. It is such a fun fight that is engaging from start to finish. Even with a standard dragon shape, Malzeno still finds a way to use its wings and tails in a different fashion from others. I loved this monster when I first saw him, and have grown to love him even more as time went on. Not to mention his theme encapsulates his design and fight perfectly. And I want to make something clear here too. Usually, my favorite monsters come from an intense backstory, or I fought them when I was just starting my Monster Hunter journey. Monsters like Deviljho, for example, were there in the beginning. For Malzeno to be in one of the more recent games and still be this high on the list is honestly impressive. He has surpassed some of my favorite monsters that I wouldn't have ever thought would change otherwise. His fight, design, music, and equipment are all peak Monster Hunter, and he definitely deserves the bronze medal here. One of the greatest things about Monster Hunter is, surprise, the monster designs. The design of a monster is very important to me, especially for this list. So it's weird that perhaps the most basic design monster is at number 2, but that's because his fight is my all-time favorite in the entire series. Fatalis from Monster Hunter World Iceborne. This monster, when it first came out, was beyond difficult. He is one of the most challenging bosses I have ever experienced. And look, this is coming from someone who has played all of Soulsborne, Elden Ring, Sekiro, and plenty of Souls-likes, including my most recent adventure, First Berserker Kazan, and that game was ridiculous. Fatalis took me a solid day to finally defeat, and that was with an entire team of experienced players. They completely reworked this fight to fit the modern mold of Iceborne. This wasn't just Fatalis anymore, this was the first black dragon of the entire series that now upheld that title with multiple phases, devastating fire attacks, which required barriers to avoid, and a strict goal to work towards: destroy the horns. You can take a group of randoms, and we will all focus on the same thing, which is the horns. There are layers to this fight too, because you can use the cannons, there's the ballistas, or the binders to keep them in place. My favorite is the rotating mounted gun, because it makes me feel like the main character of a 1980s action thriller. However, with a good team of players, you can overcome Fatalis and break the horns. Seeing his power wane from your progress is pretty amazing. Fatalis in Iceborne really emphasizes the co-op quality of Monster Hunter. You and a team of friends or randoms are working together, coordinating your attacks to take down literal history, according to the lore. And then the main theme kicks in, Proof of a Hero. When you're reaching the end of the quest, it gives me goosebumps every single time. Now, he's not the first monster to emphasize co-op for me. That belongs to Elatrion from Monster Hunter 3, but I think Fatalis is the best example of Monster Hunter's great multiplayer combat. If you have players that know exactly what they're doing, you're gonna have a grand time fighting this dragon. If you don't, you might as well restart. Not to mention his gear was ridiculously overpowered. I mean, it basically fit the mold for most builds, and very rarely was there an armor set that did better than Fatalis. The Black Dragon himself was at one point my favorite monster of all time, but has scooched back to second place for the sole reason of nostalgia. At number 1 is the very first monster I discovered in the Monster Hunter series. A monster that I am tired of not giving the praise and respect he deserves. Fatalis is the best fight in the series. Malzeno is one of the best designed monsters in the entire series. But Lagiacrus from Monster Hunter 3 Tri is truly my favorite monster in the entire franchise. And yes, that's how I pronounce it. I'm not gonna say Lagiacrus or Lagiacrus. I know it's wrong, but get over it. That's how I've always pronounced it. When I found the box art for this game back in 2010 at my local GameStop, they still have those today, right? I don't know. I called my mom immediately, asking if I could buy this game. She would regret her decision shortly after, because all I would do was play Monster Hunter 3. I was excited to take on the flagship of this game, and when I did, it wasn't anything special. Don't get me wrong, I love everything about Lagiacrus, but as time went on, new monsters came out, monsters that I thought were cooler, and had better fights at the time. My list changed drastically, and Lagiacrus was lost in the mixture. Still in my top 10, but never close to being my favorite. It wasn't until Lagiacrus was announced for Monster Hunter Wilds title update numero 2 that I had a resurgence of nostalgia and joy, knowing that an old favorite was returning. It was this announcement that made me get back into 3 Ultimate, and when I did, a huge wave of nostalgia hit me like a brick. I missed this game. I missed the slower pace of the adventure. I missed the unique atmosphere of the game, Moga Village, D Island, the music, and old school Monster Hunter combat. It was slower back then for sure, but it was sort of calming. When I fought Lagiacrus again, I never had a better time playing the series. Very rarely does nostalgia hit me this hard, but you have to understand that back when I was a kid into my late teens, Monster Hunter and Nintendo were the only games I really played. 3 Ultimate took up a huge portion of my time, and I loved every second of it. Lagiacrus isn't just a monster to me anymore, he's a representation of my roots to this franchise, and a huge turning point in my gaming history. This may sound very cringe to you guys, and I understand that, but I kinda got emotional when playing through 3 Ultimate again. I'm almost 25, and I've been a fan of this series since I was 9. 16 years ago, I started this series, and I have never enjoyed this game more than I do now. In the older games, he was a great fight, but in Wilds, he's even better. Again, the modern games do such a grand job of reworking and changing old monsters. Enough where they still have their main characteristics, but are not the same fight, in a good way. Lagiacrus in Wilds is truly a blast to fight. I freaking love it. Now to clarify, it's not my favorite fight in the series, not even close. Fatalis is like a huge jump, and there's a couple monsters in between. Just know that nostalgia is kind of a big factor here for my number 1 spot. What they did basically was give him multiple charged up states as he gains more electricity, and with more power he enhances his attacks with a wider radius of lightning. But the best part, for me, was the underwater section. The Lord of the Seas comes to life during this section of the fight, and it is beautiful to see this monster in all of its HD glory underwater. Now, it's not traditional underwater combat, which I liked, by the way. but instead it's dedicated to mounting its face and diffusing the electricity enough to fight him back on land. Really, I have no complaints. I love Legiacris, it's what got me into the series, and now we have an amazing fight to back it up and keep it going. If I'm being truthfully honest though, I think some of the earlier monsters have better designs and fights. But Legiacris, like I mentioned earlier, isn't just a monster to me. He's a representation of my roots. So I feel like putting him at number 1 was the only option here. But of course, that's just my list. I would love to hear your thoughts and your favorite monsters, and if you guys want me to actually make a list of like my favorite subspecies or variants, just let your boy know. I will do that. And it's been a while since I've recorded. I just finished my summer classes, so that's why it's been a while since I've made a video. Still working on my FromSoft boss design video. I'm gonna play Visage, which is a horror game, do a review on that. If you guys want me to do the 3 ultimate like in-depth breakdown, just let me know. I'll probably still do it anyway, but I'm gonna go break all my cheap keyboards and then sell them to scalpers, and then I'll be back in my next video. Thanks for watching, and if you did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like and to subscribe for more content like this. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care everyone, and of course, stay safe.